we move, and we have to move because we have a dense agenda, remember, many aims and goals today. This committee, this context-setting session has a very clear title. It's the roadmap for 2050. We will give voice, basically in this session, to the three main stakeholder groups promoting the Low-Emission Solutions Conference: the business, the local government, and the academia. Just as a practical note, there is a very clear report available at the conference website that I encourage you to check it. It's called Roadmap to 2050, a manual for nations to decarbonize by mid-century.
So in order to discuss on this roadmap to 2050, I would like to welcome on the stage the following speakers. Maria Mendiluce, who is the Managing Director of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Paolo Carnevale, who is the Director of the Fondazione Eni Enrico Mattei. And Kobe Brand, who is the Regional Director of ICLEI, Global Governments for Sustainability in Africa. Thank you very much, the three of you.
So thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here today to share with you the business experience. But before doing that, I want to tell you how this Low Emission Solution Conference was created about 3-4 years ago. So, no, even more, 6 years ago, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development started a very interesting and long-standing collaboration with Jeff and the SDSN, and we created the Low Carbon Technology Partnership Initiative, which then followed with this format of the Low Emission Solution Conference, which we have been doing for the past 4 years since Marrakesh. And it has been a very interesting exercise of bringing cities, business, and the scientific community. So I want to thank Jeff, our colleagues in ICLEI, and Elena, who has been at the heart of developing this conference. And now I'm going to present the business perspective. So I understand that this is going to be a very technical conference, so you have to allow that I go a little bit higher than that, and that I tell you what business wants and needs, and where business stands today at COP25. So within the business community, now net zero, achieving net zero emissions by 2050 has become the new North Star. This means that many businesses, there is 100 and more to come, are committing to reduce their emissions as much as possible and to use carbon offsets, removals, to compensate so that they have no impact on the environment. The World Business Council has around 200 big companies. The International Chamber of Commerce brings together all the Chamber of Commerce. The World Economic Forum, you know them well, they also bring a lot of business. And the three organizations, which are probably the biggest business organizations, we are all aligning behind these net zero targets. And for that, we think that there are three necessary steps that business need to do. First, they need to disclose their emissions and they be transparent about it. They need to report to the Task Force on Climate Financial Disclosures. I understand that this is a very technical group, so just to see whether you're listening or not, I want to ask who knows about the TCFD? Who has heard about it? Okay, good. So I see that there are a few that has not done it. So I'm going to explain what it is, okay? So that you don't... So you know that companies report their results every quarter or every year, and they include the financial risks that the companies have in that period or in their operations. But within those risks, they often miss and do not include the environmental and social risks that the company carries on its operations. And so the Bank of England asked the Financial Stability Board asked a group of experts to develop some recommendations on how companies could integrate environmental and social risk into the financial reporting. And this is really important because if we do so, then companies are going to be valued by the real risks and the way that they are approaching those risks. And so companies that have less risks, so companies that are cleaner, will have a reduced risk and hence a better cost of capital when financing their investment. So this, for the business community, is really important. So companies first need to understand what are those risks and what are the opportunities. We have been talking a lot about risks, but companies now understand that there are clear opportunities on reducing their emissions and providing those products and services to their clients. The second thing that companies are doing and need to do is set science-based targets. This is objectives to reduce their emissions aligned with these net zero objectives. Those science-based targets will be built upon 4 main pillars that constitute the carbon footprint of companies. The first one is to understand what are the energy emissions of the company, the industry and material emissions, transport and land. And I was hearing to the previous panel, and it is so interesting because engineers, you have such an important role on bringing solutions to those 4 panels. On the energy front, where we think that more research is needed is on the carbon capture and use and storage for energy plants. The big challenge that we have with now renewables being competitive is how to electrify most of the energy uses, and as you know, electrifying high temperature heat is still a challenge, although I hear that there are some new technologies that can achieve that with electricity. So any research that you do on that direction would be very, very beneficial for business. And on the industry side, there is a wealth of research that is needed. I think especially on everything that has to do with circular economy. So you need to take into account that to produce a ton of steel, you need 2.4 tons of CO2. If you recycle that steel, it's only 0.4. If we continue with the use of materials in the way that we are using today, we completely overshoot the carbon budget. As you know, we have around 800 gigatons of carbon budget from now until the year 2100. If we continue with the current trend of using materials, all that budget will be consumed by materials. And the carbon budget that should be allocated to materials. So even if you include energy efficiency, even if those materials are produced with clean energy, you will still be producing emissions. And that's where the circular economy has a really important role to play. And I hope that here the university and research from around the world spend a lot of time both in finding solutions in the circular economy space, and also on encouraging policymakers to develop the policies that are needed for the market to pick up in that front. On transport, obviously, there is a lot that is developing. The electrification of transport, it's a given today. We work a lot with auto companies, and they are completely turning their investment into electric. We face is on airplane longer those trucks are not used for long distance. Actually, they go from logistics center to logistics center, which means that we could also electrify freight transport. And that points to something that I think we need to do better, collaborating. Cities, you don't have that data. And so partnerships with business and research is really important to be able to come to these conclusions. And lastly, land. So natural climate solutions are now the hottest topic not in the negotiations, but in the business community and in the cities as well. Because both companies and cities realize that if they want to be net zero, they need to offset some of the emissions, because some of the technologies are not available for them to completely offset their emissions. So natural climate solutions can contribute with 30% of the emission reduction from now until 2050. You should remember that we have a big challenge on climate, because if we want to be net zero by 2050, if these are the emissions, right, that there are 54 gigatons of emissions today. If we want to be on track to be net zero, we need to reduce them by 50% in the next 10 years, by 50% by 2040, and again by 50% by 2050. So you see, this is where we need to get, which is around 7 gigatons. So this is a huge challenge, and nature has a key role to play, and it has a role to play today. And we need you, we need research to find out how much trees can sequester, how much each natural climate solutions, how much emissions they can sequester, how does it work? Because the market out there doesn't know, and there is a big research gap, and we at WBCSD, we're going to be working on this in the next few years. So I have told you a little bit the solutions that I see and the link with the research community, but when it comes to business, once we understand the science-based targets, we need to understand what are the barriers that the business face to implement these solutions, and then business need to integrate these plans into the company strategy. This means that the company strategy is going to include new set of rules for procurement, for the procurement of goods and materials that are aligned with those net zero targets. It means that we need to change the investment plans of companies, the commercial plans. We need to change, companies need to change the way that they communicate about climate change. I think time is out. So, I have been working on climate for the past 12 years. And when I started my job at WBCSD, I was always too afraid of going too far, okay? Because the ambience was a bit sensitive. Now, every time I talk about these things, and I'm checking my members that I see in the room, I need to make sure that I'm going far enough, because there is a revolution that is happening in the business community. The business community is really committed to the way to net zero. Big companies are very committed. They want to work with research, with companies, with other companies, with cities, because they realize that they cannot achieve net zero alone, and this collaboration is fundamental. So thank you very much.